This is the Voss Report, and I am Paul Voss. The United States has a 2,000-mile border with Mexico. Over many years, 10 to 30 million undocumented immigrants have crossed that border illegally and now reside in the U.S. This year, there has been a mass assault on the southern border by Central American migrants. Policies put in place in the last few months have stemmed the flow of migrants arriving at the border. Media coverage of the border, as a result, has gone dark. This report examines the physical border, planned walls, and profiles of Central American countries. The United States and Mexico share a 1,954-mile border. In May and June, "Crisis at the Border" was the headline throughout the media. Then the story went dark. This report features how many are here, apprehensions, presidents speak, the president's policies, Central America profiled, controlling the border. According to a recent research study from MIT Sloan and Yale University professors, the number of undocumented immigrants are an estimated 22 million. They could be as low as 16 million or as high as 30 million. A recent Pew Research report estimates undocumented immigrants at 10.5 million, which is the same as the 2004 level. The U.S. recession caused a large number of illegals to return to Mexico. Mexicans are no longer the majority of illegals. Central Americans are now the main group, and the number of Asians is rising too. Where do the undocumented immigrants live? California, Texas, Florida, New York, New Jersey, and Illinois. Pew researchers and their collaborators claim to have the formula for accurately estimating the number of undocumented immigrants. In the meantime, the U.S. Census Bureau clings to the 11 to 12 million number. The chart shows the number of border apprehensions by month for the period 2015 to September 2019. Apprehensions peaked in May 2019 at 144,000 and were 52,000 in September, a 64% reduction from May. The media has been silent about the reduction. 3 presidents, Clinton, Bush, and Obama, stated their border accomplishments during State of the Union addresses. The common theme: increased the number of Border Patrol agents, deported criminal aliens, built border fencing, reduced illegal crossings. Addressing the border issue, the president leaned on a Republican-led Congress in his first 2 years to get something done on immigration and the border wall. The Republican-led Congress sat on their hands. Previous presidents gave up after being blocked by Congress on illegal immigration. 2, searching for dollars. The president then went to Congress for border wall funding and received a small amount. The search for wall money resulted in the following: $1.37 billion from the federal budget, $3.6 billion redirected money from military construction projects, $2.5 billion redirected DoD money, $600 million from Treasury forfeiture funds. A total of $8.1 billion for border wall construction. 3. The president threatened to impose sanctions on Mexico, our third largest trading partner, totaling $670 billion, if they did not agree to stop caravans at their southern border. Tariffs would start at 5% and scale up to 25%. Mexico agreed to deploy National Guard troops throughout the country, with priority on its southern border with Guatemala. 4. Moving the border south. The Trump administration
has reached agreements with Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala that would require migrants who cross into Guatemala on their way to the U.S. to apply for protections in Guatemala instead of at the U.S. border. This would effectively cut off their access to the American asylum system before they even reach the southern border. Central Americans, not Mexicans, now account for most of the people arriving at our southern border. Although the migrant trail extends all the way to Africa and Asia. 2 weeks ago, Mexican National Guard troops blocked a caravan of approximately 2,000 from entering Mexico. About 50% of the caravan were Africans. Guatemala is a strategic location on the migrant trail because the country is the funnel to Mexico. A look at the South American countries follows. An economic and demographic profile of the 4 Central American countries is presented on this slide. A summary follows. Combined population, 38 million. Combined GDP, 545 billion. Population below poverty level, 17 to 18 million. High murder rates, cartels and gangs active. 2 countries with growing populations of young people. Economic opportunities for its citizens are not bright. Remittances from citizens living abroad important. Nicaragua is a nation in crisis. Political unrest and economy in trouble. President is Daniel Ortega, a Marxist, and his wife is conveniently the vice president.
Spend money on economic development, not walls, is suggested by some. These countries have been basket cases for decades due to poor political and economic leadership and corruption. The U.S. has been providing these countries with foreign aid for decades. And what are the results? Where did the money go? Swiss bank accounts? For the U.S. to assist with economic development and increase foreign aid puts the U.S. in the nation-building business. How has the U.S. done with nation-building in Iraq and Afghanistan? Nation-building takes decades. Controlling the border is the immediate issue. Short term, the U.S. is faced with 4 countries having a combined population of 38 million, with 18 million poverty-stricken, a horde of people that would easily overwhelm our schools, welfare programs, and medical care system. The U.S. taxpayer would see their federal, state, county, and city taxes go up. For the short term, policies to stem the flow north need to be pursued. Victor Davis Hanson's column this morning titled, "Is California Becoming Pre-Modern?" In the following excerpt, he is talking about California. No one would dare to connect the crumbling infrastructure, poor schools, and failing public health care with the non-enforcement of immigration laws, which has led to a massive influx of undocumented immigrants from the poorest regions of the world, who often arrive without fluency in English or a high school education. The number of Border Patrol agents reached a high of 21,494 in 2012 and has experienced a steady but slow decline since 2012. Border Patrol has experienced difficulty in retaining and hiring new agents. A hiring process that once took 300 days has been shortened to 120 days. The President issued an executive order in 2017 to hire an additional 5,000 Border Patrol agents. The spike in the number of people arriving at the border this summer, and with the Border Patrol understaffed, necessitated the National Guard call-up. The recruiting numbers need to screen 75,000 applicants to hire 5,000 new agents. Border control with physical structures. Most of the barriers along the U.S.-Mexico border are old, ineffective, and dilapidated. There are 1,954 miles of border, 1,000 miles considered suitable for a wall. Presently, there are 654 miles of some type of barrier, composed of 354 miles of pedestrian barriers, 300 miles of vehicle barrier. Mountains and deserts make 1,000 miles not suitable for a wall. 450 miles of wall to be built by the end of 2020. Most of the wall construction will be replacing existing barriers. 4 images showing examples of existing barriers along the border. Upper left shows a wall section built using surplus helicopter landing mats left over from the Vietnam War. Next to it, a vehicle barrier. Lower left, a chain link fence. Next to it shows an old and ineffective border barrier. There are about 1,000 border miles where a wall is not necessary. 3 images of harsh, desolate desert with some mountains. This is the geography along the border in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. The California-Arizona-New Mexico border. California, border well covered with barriers. U.S. government owns most of the land along the border. Existing barriers are old, ineffective, and dilapidated. Arizona, primarily vehicle barrier along border. U.S. government owns most of the land along the border. There are 65 miles of tribal land on the Arizona border. New Mexico. For most of the New Mexico border, road barriers are what separate the two countries, and it's easy to get through it on foot. Texas has 1,254 miles of border with Mexico. That is 65% of our entire border. Texas has the longest portion of uncovered border. The Rio Grande Valley in South Texas is the busiest crossing point along the entire border and does not have any barriers. A total of 95 miles of non-contiguous wall will be built, with some of it already under construction. The Laredo area is to have 52 miles of new wall. The El Paso, Texas area is scheduled for 40 miles of new wall to replace chain link fence. This project is scheduled to be completed by April. The Border Patrol submitted their specs for new border wall, and they were approved. The specs are: wall will be in 2 configurations, 18 feet and 30 feet. New wall will also include the following: lighting, access roads, sensors, special technology. Border agents also required a see-through fence. Enables border agents to be alert to any threats from the other side of the border. Those threats can be people throwing rocks or bales of drugs over the wall. The Border Patrol's recommended construction priorities for the new wall were also accepted by Washington. Wall update. 1. 1,954 miles of border with Mexico. 1,000 miles not suitable for a wall. Miles suitable for a wall, 954 miles. 2. Currently 654 miles of some type of barrier. 354 miles of some semblance of wall. 300 miles of vehicle barrier. 3. Goal is to build 450 miles of new wall by the end of 2020. Most of these new walls will replace existing barriers constructed from 2006 to 2010. 4. 75 miles of new wall has been completed, with 158 miles under construction. 5. Funds transferred from DOD of $6.1 billion has been allocated to 18 wall projects totaling 309 miles. These projects will be in California, Arizona, and New Mexico. New wall where there has not been any.
Where no barrier exists, it will take time to acquire property rights to build new wall. This is a minor problem in California, Arizona, and New Mexico because the federal government owns most of the land along the border. This is a problem in Texas because the federal government ownership of land along the border is minimal. Once the property rights are attained, then you have to fight through a mountain of federal regulation in the form of Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, Clean Air Act, Solid Waste Disposal Act, and 20 other environmental laws. Faced with property rights issues and federal regulation, it is no wonder you tackle wall replacement immediately to show border security progress. It would take 2 to 3 years to begin construction if you had to obtain property rights and fight through federal regulation. Congress is nowhere to be found. There are 10 to 30 million illegals residing in the U.S. It is a crime for immigrants to improperly cross the border. Fearing violence or lack of economic opportunity in a home country does not qualify anyone for refugee status. Show up at the border with a child, you're detained for 20 days, then released into the U.S. with a court appearance sometime in the future. A minuscule number show up for those court appearances. Congress is the main cause for our ineffective immigration system. Our elected officials have failed to address the immigration issue for decades. Central Americans or American citizens. There are those who would like to open the southern border and lay down a welcome mat. They also have proposed free health care, education, and welfare benefits to the migrants. Wait a minute. Before you open the door and begin offering a cornucopia of benefits, you have overlooked some people. There are 38 million Americans, which equals the population of those 4 Central American countries, living in poverty, and 550,000 homeless people living in tents. Let's address those issues first.